been such an exciting day. First episode finally recorded for the Emblazers podcast.
Yeah, the world needed this podcast because there aren't enough. So
there are definitely not enough. At least not enough podcasts with two hosts that have basically the most incredible hair, might I say.
Yeah, there you go. Doppelganger.
Yeah.
And a podcast that deals with the things that sales leaders need to hear from experts in the field who have data and research to support it, not just opinions.
Right, exactly. I love that we just talked to Dr. Leff Bonney from FSU Sales Institute, and he just solidified, at least I heard, AI, the dust is settled.
It's done? Oh,
it's done.
Well, first of all,
we're done.
AI, cheers,
So,
drinking game.
Cheers to that. AI, it's finally done. We don't have to talk about it anymore.
First minute in our first episode, and you dropped AI. Way to go. So basic. Yeah, but you're right. He said the dust is settled, and then he kind of went, well, the dust is settling. But either way, our audience, I think, is going to find out where they are or aren't relative to the AI dust settlement.
Yeah, keep listening. It's you're in for a treat. Our guest today, Dr. Leff Bonney, he is a behavioral scientist and associate professor of sales and marketing at the Florida State University Sales Institute, which he also founded. But Leff hasn't always been in academia. In fact, he spent decades in sales leadership roles before becoming a leading sales researcher specializing in customer selection, as well as adaptive sales strategies and methodologies. He's also our research director here at Emblazers, and I am excited that he's joining us today. Leff, it's great to see you. Welcome to the Emblazers show.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. It's always great to talk to folks who are fellow sales nerds like me and like to sit around and pontificate on these topics. So I'm always excited to be with you guys.
I resemble that comment.
Well, I did use pontificate right out of the gate. I wanted to make sure to establish the professorial thing. I'm just kidding. I'm going to look up pontificate when we're done to see what that means.
What's awesome about that, Leff, is that I know you for many years now, and that's why we wanted to get that on the table first. If somebody said, "Oh, there's a professor on," this is going to be boring, and that's not going to be real world stuff. But that's not true with you. You came from the real world of selling. So what I've always appreciated is you're in touch with and produce practical, usable stuff right out of the gates with your research. And so we're excited to have you on this inaugural edition of the Emblazers. It's the beginning of 2025. And so we'd be remiss if we didn't ask the standard beginning of the year question. So here's my question for you. What trends are you seeing, right? You have corporations you work with, you teach the next generation of students, you're doing research. What trends, what issues are emerging or taking flight in the coming year for sales leaders that you've got your eyes on and you think they need to have their eyes on?
Yeah. Well, obviously lots of things come to mind, Tim. I think it's exciting. You know, I think if we look back on 2024 and think about what did we spend our time talking about in 24, AI was obviously the word we always seem like we put in every sentence. And I felt like we were trying to figure it out. And I think maybe the dust is settling a little bit in terms of what are we going to do with AI? Where is it going to have its biggest impact in sales and on the sales process in 25? So I'm excited about that. I think, one of the things that's fun to watch about it is you all know me, and I've been on things before. I'm just such an agility and adaptability kind of guy. I think we have to move away from these static sales models that teach our sellers go do this and do it every time, no matter what. And what I think is cool about AI, and I think maybe 2025 trends is, I think we're ushering in an era of adaptability that is going to be AI assisted. And I think that's going to be fun. I think that's going to be fun to watch how we can take what rattles around in the head of our top performers and they do naturally, and sort of codify it and put it into these cool tools that can help maybe the not so all-star sellers be more like the all-stars. It will augment them in a way that will make them so much more intelligent, so much quicker in the sales process, but more importantly, I think more effective in the sales process because of the agility it's going to bring to them getting assistance on which way they should pivot and where they should go in deal pursuit. So I think that's pretty exciting of where that's headed.
For those of you who had AI as like on your bingo card. That took 5 seconds to get to that, and certainly I appreciate that is on the list, because and the idea that the dust is settling, I think is really interesting, and I want to pursue that a little bit. Is that I feel like there was like a lot of interest, but still a ton of hesitation. Like, this is going to be big. I don't think we can do it yet. And now you're saying that people are going to be diving in. Like, what do you think are like the first three things? You said AI assisted, but what does that look like beneath that? One layer below that, what will I as a seller be doing different, and what will I as a sales leader be asking my team to do different, or maybe even me as a leader do different using AI that you think are like, yep, these are now low hanging fruit. This is a reality. And 2025, these should be part of your cadence.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say dust is settled like, hey, we're going to have our AI built into our sales stack, and that's what we're going to do for the next 5 years. I really think we've all been sort of, thinking about, what all the possibilities. In 24, it was all about what are the possibilities that AI is going to do. And what I meant by dust is settled is I think organizations are finally sort of landing on, hey, it might do all of those cool things we sat around and talked about in 24, but for 25, this is what we're going to get it to do. And yes, possibilities will come up in the future, and that's going to evolve. But let's stop talking and let this, maybe I'll rephrase, let's stop letting it be a distraction about what we're going to do as a sales organization. Let's know that it can do these three things, and that's what we're going to use it for. And then we'll let other cool stuff evolve down the road. And so to answer your question about the sort of the double click down, I think mainly around the efficiency side of sellers is where the dust is settling in terms of using it as a tool to help speed us up in sort of our normal processes. So the idea of taking mundane things off our plates, like call appointment setting and mining emails for meeting notes and all those kinds of things. I mean, that's a thing that it's here and it's doing. And I think that's, going to help people be more efficient. Obviously, outreach campaigns are more and more, it seems, going every day to AI type of tools. And that's great. Let's take those off the seller's plate, because that's not what we pay them to do, really. I mean, that's a peripheral that unfortunately over the last few years became a core function we were asking sellers or BDRs to do. And now I think that'll become peripheral so that they can get to more value add type things that they can do with customers. So it's mainly about efficient. I think the AI dust, when I say it's settled, is around the efficiency side, making sellers move quicker. But then I think as we get maybe later into 25, and maybe I'm cheating and saying 26, but that's where I think you'll start to see it be more also this assist of, hey, I'm going to look at your Gong recordings or your conversational intelligence recordings, and I'm going to make recommendations of how you should pivot in this deal pursuit. I think those kinds of technologies are maturing very quickly. And that's what I think. Efficiency stuff is just, I don't find all that exciting. I think what exciting is how we're going to make sellers better, not faster, but better. And that's what I think the AI stuff's really cool about.
Yeah, if we don't make them better and we just make them faster, then that will just speed up the sucking at that point.
That's right. That's right. Our close rate didn't improve. We just lost a lot faster in 25 than we ever did before. Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
So, Leff, I think it's interesting to talk about AI for the sales rep. But here's something that I learned from you, actually, to think about this on both sides of this coin. That it's one thing for the sales team to be leveraging AI, but we can't blindly think that customers aren't trying to figure out how to leverage AI. We know they're already digital savvy buyers. We know they're doing a lot of self-service. Where's AI going to show up in the customer side of things that we as sales and sales leaders need to consider when we confront the customer and all of a sudden they're loaded for bear with AI?
Yeah. I think that's really going to be a trend that I think most B2B sales leaders should be keeping their eye on, is what are our customers doing with AI? And we shared some research in a previous webinar around, sort of the current use in purchasing organizations is around assessing current vendors and sort of vendor performance and inventory mix, shopping cart analysis, and figuring out who should we be buying stuff from to optimize our spend, et cetera. But rapidly approaching is this, how do we use AI to evaluate new vendors? How do we use it to maybe find people out there in the world that we didn't know existed that could come help us solve problems in our organization? And I think those are going to be big issues for sellers and sales leaders to start thinking about, which is, one, you might have a whole new mix of competitors almost overnight that you competed regionally or you competed against North American competitors. And all of a sudden there's somebody in South America you've never heard of that someone's AI search, purchasing AI search function went out and found them as a very viable vendor, and you don't know anything about them. So I think thinking through, like, what are the implications of a whole new batch of competitors that are coming in is huge. But I guess what I keep thinking about when I think about this is once upon a time, I was in front of a bunch of purchasing agents. And I said, hey, is it really true that you all don't want to do business with salespeople? Like, you want to go to this digital, transactional, arm's length kinds of things, and that you'll use technology to do it, and that you don't want to talk to salespeople. And what was interesting is I remember one purchasing person, supply chain leader of an organization, raised his hand. He said, no, we just don't want to work with the bad salespeople anymore. And he said, what the tools allow us to do is push things off to bad sellers. But even though we might still have to deal with their companies for various reasons, we can interact with them transactionally and digitally in a way that we don't have to waste time with those folks. But the good sellers, these tools are great because they give us more time with them. And I think what's interesting is, from sales leader standpoint, is what would you do if you got more time with customers? Like, have you ever thought that through? And how would you equip your sellers, especially your good ones, if they're getting even more time with customers? Because I think for some sales organizations, and certainly for some of your top performers in sales organizations, in 2026, 25, they're going to find themselves with more time in front of customers. They better think about, what are they bringing to the table? Like, what are they going to do about that? Because the bad sellers are gone from that purchasing team's life. And now they're looking to you with, what else should we be doing, or how do we work together? And I just don't think sellers are necessarily have thought that through. What would I do if I got 20% more time with a customer next year?
Leff, this is really insightful information. I know that with all this research that you've done, and I'm curious, thinking about your role at FSU and how you're working with these new pups, so to speak, not these old dogs like Tim on the other side of my screen here. Oh, just kidding, Tim. I love you. What are you training? What are you teaching these future sellers on, really, and what sort of value are they going to be bringing?
Well, first I'll defend Tim and say, Tim, listen, we are both old dogs in this game. And my daughters, who are in their 20s, are wise dogs.
I should have rephrased.
Yes, that's for sure.
Wise dogs.
My daughters are quick to point out to me, like, I'll come home and tell a story about how I just killed in class and everyone laughed and it was great. And I still got it. And my daughters are always quick to remind me, Dad, they're laughing at you now, not with you. Like, you've moved past them. This wasn't a good day for you in class.
You also hold their grades in your hands, so you might be getting a mercy laugh too.
That's true. That's a good point. The smart ones. That's how we know who we need to pick for our best sellers, right? They have high EQ and they can pick up on that stuff. Yeah. So, what are we teaching? Yeah, I guess, you got to think about the next generation of seller. We have them sitting in our classes. And for those of you dialing into our podcast, if you're not familiar with sales programs, they are growing very quickly. I got into the sales program business in 2008. And there were about 30 universities that were very active as sales schools. And now we're up to about 100, which sounds great, but also there's also something like 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States. So a high growth percentage, but still a low percentage market share, if you will, of colleges are doing training. But the point here is, you got to ask ourselves, what's a 21, 22-year-old able to do? The foundations are still the foundations. We're still teaching that. We think we do a really good job with it. And our students go out and they perform. We've done research and they perform at about a 20% premium over people who didn't come from a sales program after 2 years. And so, I tell folks who show up and say, why should I recruit a 21-year-old? And I say, well, you should recruit them because they're going to outperform whoever else you hire as you go through. And the reason is because they've had 2 years of corporate training. I mean, can you imagine, we struggle to talk about letting somebody come out of the field for 5 days to get sales training. And our students are going through a sales training program for 2 years. And so they are just as fundamentally developed as they can be when they come out. But we're even starting to have to ask ourselves this question, right? Are the fundamentals that were the fundamentals in 2000 and 2010 still the fundamentals that we should be teaching today? And so we have our kind of our own debate going on about, is consultative selling really still the gold standard of foundational skills that you should be training? And there's a lot of evidence that says that's not the case anymore. And so we're starting to rethink, how do we teach? And so at FSU, we're starting to rethink our curriculum around situations. Hey, what is the right way to sell to someone who's never heard of you and is, you're reaching out as a sort of a cold contact, trying to start the process, versus, hey, you're selling to someone and they're bringing you in. They have heard of you, but they're bringing you in late in the game on a deal. What would you do in that situation? And then, oh, by the way, you've had this customer for a long time. It's time for them to renew. How do we sell that? So we're starting to rethink and revamp. It's like, let's not teach a way to go sell and then just tell them go out in the world and do it. Let's actually bring the world into the classroom and say, now, what do we do when this shows up? And we might have entire classes that are devoted to stage of customer journey. Instead of it being about sales 101 and sales 201, it's going to be situation 1, situation 2, situation 3 in our classes. So that we're trying to, again, the adaptability thing, I can't get away from it. We're trying to even get our 20-year-olds and 22-year-olds a head start on this.
They're more malleable. So you should start them early on this idea of adaptability. And you mentioned it earlier, so I'm going to come back to it since you just dropped that hanky, because I know it's your favorite. So I'll pick it up. The idea here of linear selling processes, sort of one size fits all linear selling processes, giving way to what and I know your dad was in the military, he flew jets, I think. So
Yep.
You like this. It's going from traditional symmetric warfare to asymmetric. Like customers you don't know where you're going to be when you show up, in terms of where the customer is in their journey, what work they've done, what work needs to be done, what they know, what they don't know, how confused they are. And so just teaching somebody, here, start at stage 0 and start doing this, regardless of who you show up and where you show up in their process, seems to be antiquated. So this agility thing, and I know you like to use the word mission-based, like you're running this mission or that mission. Talk to us a little bit more about that, both, how you teach it, but also how companies need to be thinking about identifying what missions their teams actually run and how they can make their teams more agile to deal with what I think is like asymmetric engagement with sort of a hard to pin down customer.
Well, let's hear what Leff has to say up next.
Dynamic revenue growth leaders know that Emblaze is the leadership insights community for them.
As the world of sales is constantly evolving and constantly changing, I think it's even more critical to get together with people to understand how are they helping to solve some of the problems that our buyers have today.
We always find a lot of value in the partnerships that we're able to form with some of the other great organizations that are part of the team here. And personally, I love the opportunity to connect with my peer group outside of other organizations and learn from them and try to figure out if there's things that they're doing that we can pull into our organization and benefit from.
Go to emblazegrowth.com/join and start your free Insights membership. Take control of your revenue future today.
So, agility, Tim, it's a great point, right? So when you think about sales organizations, what do they typically do? They bring people in, they've subscribed to some sort of methodology and process, and they say, we're going to, as a part of your, whatever it is, 1 year, 2 year, training ramp up period, we're going to teach you this methodology and our way of selling. But almost universally, those things are static. It's this is the way. And if you think, most of them are pretty rooted in new customer acquisition, and you've never met this customer before, so let's go in and do needs discovery. And oh, by the way, they're still fairly early in their problem sort of stage of trying to figure out what do they need to fix in their organization. So good news, here you are to ask good questions, and you're going to run our play that way. But anyone who's been in sales for half a second knows, hey, you know what, that works maybe in about 25% of my situations. And so that's great. Thanks corporate for that. But what do I do in the other 75? And I was talking to a sales leader not long ago, and he said, so you're telling me we got to teach, different ways to sell. We have a hard enough time getting people to stick to our one way of selling. And I said, have you ever thought that maybe the problem is it's because they're sticking to your one way and figuring out it doesn't work that they're abandoning it to go to something else that they have to figure out on their own. And I said, I would actually, I'll bet you money that if you teach them some agility concepts and maybe some multiple variations, it'll stick longer, right? Because I think it'll be more, hey, I'm using it in the moment. I'm adjusting. You've given me the tools to adjust, right? No one ever talks about this with anybody else, by the way. You ever heard of back to fighter pilots, Tim? No one's ever said, well, we taught the fighter pilot how to fly, but gosh, they just forgot all about it and abandoned that, 2 years into their career. No, right? Like if you teach them the right way and teach them to be adaptive and give them a systematic way to think about things, they stick with it. It sticks with them. So back to your question, right? Like, so you got to put people in these situations, figure out what the common situations are in your organization. You're not going to find all of them. You can't have a process for every little thing that comes up, but it's more than one situation.
Right.
And, if we can give people some parameters to say, if you see this, then do this, and give them some help. And great, this is where I was saying AI to the rescue on helping manage sort of the cognitive load of that. It becomes actually pretty easy to do. And the effectiveness of your sellers goes way up.
I love that part where, hey, we can't even get them to use one. That idea that I think comes from a place where they are like leaders are looking at, you leaders are looking at sort of the chaos that's going on out there relative to the customers and where they're showing up and where you're meeting them. And I think there's I call it the illusion of control. If I can just put one process on this, I can gain control over this chaos. But it really caps your opportunity to actually leverage, if you will, the chaos, because instead of being adaptable to the different situations or missions you might run, you're saying, let's just run this one. And the assumption being that it's going to work for everybody, it gives you the feeling that you've done something and that you've tried to improve the team and their ability to engage. In reality, you've probably hampered it and given them a move they can make only, like you said, 25% of the time. So I think there's this illusion of control that we all fall prey to when it seems hard out there. And we're like, okay, if we could do this, then maybe that would help. I don't know. Is that making sense?
No, yeah, it does. I agree completely. And it's like, hey, let's just keep it simple, and then we'll know we did it. And people got it. It's easier to measure that they went away with some, we can do some sort of, assurance of learning from a training standpoint. All of that is easier right up to the point that they have to go execute. And then it falls apart. So definitely. And, another thing you brought up about that is the idea that it's not just, normally a lot of times people, we're pretty adaptive when we get to, like, say, presentation stage, because we've learned about their needs and then we're going to adapt. Right. But what I would argue is you have to start adapting even earlier than that, because as we've done a lot of research, and I think the question was asked, what do you teach in sort of some of your students? Even discovery needs to be adaptive, right? Like how am I supposed to go ask consultative questions to somebody who doesn't know they have a problem? Spin is dead on arrival. If I say, tell me what your biggest challenges are, and someone looks back at me and goes, things are great. Like, I don't have any. What do you mean? I don't have any challenges. When they do. Right. But that's where the inside of the seller has to come into play. But that's a different set of questions. The minute the buyer says, I don't have any challenges, things are good, when there's probably one or two things that are staring them in the face, the seller's line of questioning has to change. And so one of the things we're starting to teach is adaptive discovery, to say when it's starting to sort of look like the customer's not real sure of their issues, there's a set of questions you should think about asking. When the customer's really sure, and by gosh, this is our problem, and I just need to know what your price is so I know if I should buy you or somebody else, that's a different line of questions, right? That customer is going to be equally frustrated with spin because they've already done all that work. They've already gone through the process of knowing what their problem is and what it's worth and all that. When you go down that path as a seller, now you feel like, I'm trying to catch you up, seller, instead of you helping me as the purchaser. They get frustrated. So sorry to go off on a tangent there, gang, but the adaptability has to start all the way back at the beginning of the process. Right now, people who say they do it well are really only doing it kind of on the back end of the sales process.
Amanda, spin is what us old dogs remember as discovery. So just for you, I wanted you to know,
I was going to look it up later on. I was going to look it up later.
Tim and I used to
insert
Tim and I used to put in our cassette tapes to listen how to be better at spin.
to our spin training. Yeah.
Okay. I did have a cassette tape. Yeah, maybe I'm just thinking about what y'all just said a little bit differently. And if I'm going off base, well, here we are. So I'm thinking, we have leaders listening to this conversation, and maybe they are recognizing that in their own teams and their own leadership that they have not been adaptive in their leadership style. Where could they start to make a slow shift to then bring that culture change to their teams based off of your time in the sales world?
Yeah, well, so a couple of things I would sort of point to here is analytics. We all think about customer analytics, and hey, because the analytics are starting to show us we have different kinds of customers, we have different kind of opportunities, and maybe we should be adjusting our place to those. I think maybe another thing to get excited about, and maybe not in 25, but coming soon, is our analytics on our reps. What is this rep struggling with? What situations do they do well here and not so well there? What kinds of backgrounds, where they come from? Like an analytic tool that can help a leader sort of say, oh, I can get some in the moment adaptive coaching ideas based on some things that are going on with this seller from a background, performance, where are they in their careers, like, and letting the algorithm, so to speak, serve up some, hey, here's some things you ought to be thinking about as a leader to do that. So
taking it beyond just win-loss data. It's taking it even a step further to really get into the persona of the sales team member. Yeah,
I mean, I think great organizations segment their sales teams and on more than just age and experience, right? I mean, I think they do. The world-class ones are really breaking down their sellers and putting them into some persona, or there's some segments, and then prescribing to managers, here's better ways to lead these folks based on these buckets that they fall into. And so the analytics can help. And then also, again, AI being able to help serve up sort of, we talk about next best action for customers. Well, what about next best action for a seller in terms of an improvement or intervention to help them get better? Why wouldn't it fix that? Why wouldn't it help a manager get better at that? And I think the answer is it will.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to hear a lot of that. Like here's my take on like the last 3 years or so of the technology that sellers have had at their disposal is, and depending on their adoption of it, it records a lot of things.
Right.
And near the end of the last year or so, people have been starting to leverage what's been input and saying, this looks like a deal health score of this, or a deal health score of that. And this number's bad, this number's good. If you poke beneath the surface, by the way, they're not really sure how and why they think that number's bad or this number's good, or how they even can ascribe a number. Right. But the thing that really strikes me is, like, even if I get now as a rep that says my deal health score has been determined by some set of signals to be bad, it's kind of like, okay, what's the next best thing I should do? So when you said next best action, I'm like, I feel like that's got to be the future. Sometime this year, they got to close the gap between all the signals. I don't care if it's buyer feedback or engagement feedback or conversation intelligence recordings or some other signal that then says this rep, this deal needs help. And then all the tech stack just shrugs. Now we got to be like, and here is that help. Do you agree? Yeah. Like that next best action, it has to actually be filled with something, not even like wait for the manager. Like something has to show up, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, if you're saying out of the technology, the next best action needs to have
somehow like shows up in my email practically. Yeah. We listened to your call. Here's what you should do,
Yeah, but this is where I think a manager, you talk about what's the evolving role of sales leaders. They're going to have to watch that in terms of what is the system recommending, Julie out in the bullpen to go do. Because at the moment, I would argue that AI tool is not taking Julie's capabilities into account. It's just using data to say, we win if Julie goes and does this. What if Julie's not capable of going and doing that? And so I think
She doesn't
one of
sound
the
like
things,
she is capable.
yeah, well, she's learning.
She can't be trusted. She can't be trusted,
close.
Leff.
She didn't come out of a sales program, Amanda. We got to,
She didn't go to FSU. She
That's
went
right.
to UF.
That's right.
The show brought to you by the Florida State.
Yeah. But the point is, managers are going to have to, they can't get lazy and let AI be the coach that just says, go do this. Like, that's kind of where it's almost more like the art side now. The art of managing is to step in and go, Julie, I know the system just gave you a next best action on this big client to go do blank. Let me help here, knowing in the back of their mind as a manager, Julie's going to need a lot of help to execute that one. And then she looks over at another deal. Julie got another next best action. No problem. Julie's totally capable of doing that. I don't need to babysit it. She can go do it. But, managers having that sort of human override to say, I know the system says you should go do this, but that's a prescription for someone who's farther advanced than you. I got to step in here. I don't know how that's going to get done right off because I don't think there's tools doing that at the moment. I think that's a manager's going to have to really be paying attention and have visibility into what are all these tools telling their reps to go do.
Right. And hopefully it's at least directionally accurate, and then the manager can make it actually work. So it's not 0, it's not a 10, but maybe it's a 2 or 3, and then the manager turns that into a 5, 6, or 7 with their intervention. And maybe that's an efficiency gain for the manager, but yet then they get to do what they do best with Julie, who seems to be in apparently a lot of need of help from today's conversation. Hey, Amanda, here's what I want to talk about, because you and I are pretty excited about something coming up in April.
Yes.
We have the Emblazers Revenue Summit. Those of you who came the last 2 years know it as the Emblazers Digital Now Revenue Summit, but it was kind of like, it's all digital. So I don't know why we say that anymore. So it's not just the Emblazers Revenue Summit. And Leff, you have been one of the rock stars of our past summits by bringing your research that has been so practical that when we look at all the scores of the sessions, and there's going to be like 40 or 50 sessions, Leff Bonney sessions keep rising to the top. So I want to ask you a little bit about your upcoming appearance at the Emblazers Revenue Summit, April 15th through the 17th in Denver. And I would love to hear a little bit of a sneak preview of the things that you plan to bring to that event.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I've been spending a lot of research time at the end of 24, kind of ongoing. It's always been a little bit of a passion of mine, but ongoing, especially heavy here toward the back of 24 on the sort of the science of differentiation. I think another important thing for sales leaders to start to think about is it's no longer enough to get my salespeople better. I have to get my salespeople better differently. or I got to train them to be different, because listen, we do lots of customer research in the B2B space, and all of them say the same thing. The level of conversation across a consideration set of vendors has gone up. In the old days, I'd get 1 good conversation and 5 bad ones. Now it's 5 good ones. But the problem is I'm left with the same issue of 5 good conversations that all look about the same doesn't help me determine who I should pick. It just means I felt better about the conversations, right? So I think being able to show and be different in your approach to selling, whether it's being different as the seller and your actual process being different, or, hey, let me make sure you understand the difference in our actual offerings. Those are 2 sort of different things. And we're going to talk about that a lot at the summit, because I do think sales organizations have to start moving into it's not enough to be good anymore. We have to be good and different. And no one's thinking about that, I think, at the level they should. So excited to share a lot of research. We've done a lot of different studies sort of showing the impact of different and how it can really increase a seller's chance of winning business. So that'll be sort of front and center, I think, when we're out there, Tim.
And arguably a remaining skill and value that a human can add, that last mile. I like to call it the last bastion of competitive differentiation, is a salesperson with their lips moving. So this is something that they still have complete control over. It's also coachable, trainable. And so when all else fails, you be the difference. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. And, go back to the quote from the purchasing person who said, all these technologies and tools are just going to give us more time with the better salespeople. I would argue what they're really saying is the ones that are different, the ones that are doing things differently, talking differently, bringing us different ideas. Those are the kinds of things that's what they want to see. And so, it's going to be important as we move forward.
I know I'm pretty excited, Leff. You are the only professor who has not ever put me to sleep. And on that note, what I will say is, for those of you who are thinking about joining us in Revenue Summit, there shouldn't be a thought. Come join. You will learn. Bring your teams. It's going to be an exciting time. Tim, Leff, this is all we've got today on episode 1 for the Emblazers. Thank you so much for being here. Any last words from either one of you before we wrap up for today?
Not for me. I'm just excited to go look up pontificate and figure out what that word meant that we used earlier in our kickoff. But no, I'm so glad to be with you guys. I have such a good time. I always love talking to you and Tim about all things sales. It's great.
Well, we appreciate it. And I'm stealing your words. This podcast, the Emblazers, we're better and different. So if you've liked what you've heard today, make sure that you like and subscribe anywhere that you're listening to this podcast. iTunes, Spotify. Ratings and reviews are very important to us. And I think it's the 5-star rating, which we're looking for. So come check us out next week, where Tim and I are chatting with another fantastic guest. Tim, that was a really incredible conversation. I always love hearing from Leff and all of his insights. What was one of your takeaways?
I learned I need to be more agile. I need to be more adaptive. So I've decided I've got to pick up a stretching routine each morning. That sales in 2025 requires some calisthenics so that I can, I don't hurt myself.
Fair. And I'm sure a lot of our own leaders that are listening or watching this feel that same sentiment. And you can stretch and adapt and learn more by joining us at this year's Revenue Summit. We're holding this in Denver, Colorado, April 15th through the 17th. It's going to be an exciting time. We've got some tremendous speakers and topics lined up. If you want to learn more, head to emblazgrowth.com. You can get all the information there.
Yeah, the Emblaze Revenue Summit, emblazgrowth.com. Can't wait to see you there.